She arrives alone, the car a dark, practical thing among polished limousines. Gravel spooks under the tires, the drive widening into a courtyard of clipped hedges and stone lions that have forgotten rain. The Bington estate sits like a museum of inheritance. Columns, murals, and gilt frames, a front door that expects ceremony. In the passenger seat, a leather folder holds a single sheet of paper that could change everything. $500 million, a merger that would take Neurospace beyond everything Danielle ever imagined and, if she signs, into someone else's idea of what the company should be. Danielle Renee Given steps out in sensible heels and a coat cut like armor. Her hair is neat, not ornamental. She moves through the servants' entrance with a CEO's gait, economy of motion, checking the world only enough to measure its needs. Eyes register the house, crystal chandeliers, a waiter polishing silver so meticulously his posture looks rehearsed, a portrait of Charles Bington in his younger arrogance hanging over the mantel, and then drop back to the folder she carries. She does not look like charity. She looks like a ledger. Neurospace began in a library where the heat wasn't reliable and the Wi-Fi was generous with its outages. She remembers a thrift store laptop and code written with both hands and hunger. She remembers Shauna standing by a radiator with a spreadsheet and saying quietly, "We can make this mean something." That meaning is a diagnostic platform, quiet, clinical, human, that corners big tech's noise with small, stubborn truth. Investors have loved the margins. Clients have whispered that Neurospace changed lives. Danielle knows there are better offers in boardroom fantasies, the kind that pay in trophies and tell you which portrait you're supposed to hang in the foyer. Inside the drawing room, the air smells of lemon oil and old paper. Victoria Bington greets her like an adjudicator. Perfect smile, gloves folded on a pearl bracelet. Charles Bington appears as a silhouette of a man who was raised to own the room before he learned to fill it with anything of value. Gregory Bington drapes his entitlement over a chair as if it were a cape. They speak polished English and softer insinuations. "We're delighted you could make it, Mrs. Given," Victoria says. Her voice is a well-made thing that smooths edges. There is a flicker, call it respect, call it curiosity, when her eyes move to Danielle's hands. They are the hands of an executive, not a socialite. They sit at a table the size of a small parliament. The seating plan is subtle choreography. Where you are placed says who you become in the room. Danielle is placed at a corner where the light is flattering, but the power is diffused, beside Gregory, instead of the patriarch. It is the unspoken rehearsal, an offering of proximity without authority. Dinner begins with small talk, with artful negotiation of taste. The Bingtons' conversation flirts with obligation, their philanthropic interests, the yacht's new wing, the charitable foundation's annual report. Danielle replies in the language of product and metrics, of impact studies and patient stories. That is her comfort. Concrete numbers against hypothetical patronage. At first the barbs are almost invisible. A pause where a hand waits for her to be called upon. A subtle correction to her timeline. "Oh, I thought you started only recently," Victoria asks, eyes bright, as if Danielle's resume needs updating to fit the room's chronology. Gregory offers a laugh that complicates into a question. "Must be hard to keep so many people's feelings aligned. Temperament, you know." The word lands like a napkin folded too neatly into a face. Temperament. It is not an accusation carved in marble. It is habit, an old family's shorthand for what they will not name. A woman who takes up space, a founder who speaks too plainly, a black woman whose authority will be read through stereotype if allowed. The rest of the table tucks their knives into plates. Someone says the name of a country estate as if it were a cure. Danielle keeps her fork moving. The clink of silver becomes ownable rhythm. She lets the remark unfold in the space between two breaths. In public, you can do less damage by doing nothing, she has learned. At other times, you must do everything. Tonight she is counting minutes and decisions. When they talk about leadership, they use a different currency. Family legacy, Charles says, easing into anecdotes about how the company board has always welcomed its stewardship. He calls Neurospace a beautiful thing, and then says, almost conversationally, "We'd love to steward it for you." Steward. The word is light and tidy. To steward is to protect. To protect is to assume you know better. Danielle remembers the boardroom at Neurospace. Whiteboards scrawled with client names. An intern asleep on a couch with a laptop on his chest. Shauna pacing with 2 phones in one hand. She remembers a night when they all ate ramen in the conference room while the servers rebooted, and the code blinked back to life like a promise. That room had been messy and human, neither exhibition nor museum. A steward would arrange less mess. He would also, quietly, rearrange the people who made the mess meaningful. She lets a smile settle that is not permission. The dinner rolls on like a play in which roles have been pre-assigned. Gregory tells a story about a boardroom he once corrected. He laughs at a joke that maps to a microaggression, a compliment slotted with a cliffhanger. It's a shame temperament gets in the way, he adds, friendly as a tax notice. The others laugh out of habit. The laughter is small and neat. Danielle hears in those laughs the world rewriting itself. She knows what happens when optics trump ownership. Buyouts become acquiescences. Companies lose their nameplates and acquire suits. She thinks of the people who had trusted her. Engineers who had stayed late to figure out an algorithm that would save a patient another year. Office staff who colored fundraising packets with the kind of care that betrays ownership without title. You could sell a platform. You could not sell the trust those people had invested in her with their overtime and belief. She excuses herself to the powder room. The corridor has mirrors and frames that reflect the room and the room's history. Danielle stands before one, adjusting her collar not in vanity but like a surgeon checking instruments. The mirror shows her face, the familiar lines of concentration. And beyond that, a flicker of the girl who used public library terminals to learn syntax by daylight between shifts. She closes her eyes and lifts a hand to steady herself. Her phone vibrates. Shauna, how do you want to handle the board letter? The CFO's message is practical, unsentimental. Shauna believes in options. She believes in the team. Danielle thumbs back. I'm listening. There is a reply with numbers, projections, and a single line at the end. We'll back you. This is not flattery. It is policy and human commitment bundled into a phrase that steadies her shoulders. In the mirror, she practices the words she might say, not angry, not shrinking. She does not want to be theater. She wants clarity. She thinks of headlines, brief, violent, reductive, and how to preempt them with truth. There is power in choosing the voice that narrates your departure. Back at the table, the conversation begins to tilt toward terms. The family's council has drafted language that seems to leave room for Danielle to hold a title while someone else holds the power. They speak in clauses and subclauses, in phrases designed to minimize disruption to their balance. We value continuity, Charles pronounces, as if continuity and capture were synonyms. A joinery, Victoria adds, smiling, as if the metaphor softens the reality. Danielle's draft of what she intends to sign is precise. Seats on the board, positions for key staff, equity retention for founders. She had been willing to cede oversight, to consult in the margins, but not at the cost of dismantling a culture that kept patients at its center. A steward would not accept that. At one point, Gregory leans forward and in a voice that tries for amiability, drops the mask to let entitlement show. If you're nervous about the spotlight, temperament, we all have it. There are always roles behind the scenes. Some of us prefer that. He pronounces the words behind the scenes as a polite amputation. The room ripples with assent. Danielle's fork hesitates mid-air. Around her, the arrangement of cutlery becomes a map of hierarchies. Across from her, Victoria reaches for the bread without looking, the action on rails and rehearsed. In the corner of the room, a painting watches them in oils, the kind of gaze that owns a private history and sells it back as legacy. Danielle hears the furniture's patience and feels the weight of choices in the scrape of a chair. She excuses herself again and walks not back to the public corridor, but to the guest suite, a small room with a view of the far lawn where statues stand like silent auditors. The bed is made with hospital precision. The room smells faintly of lavender. Someone's attempt at easing the world into softness. Danielle lays the folder on the desk and opens her laptop. She opens a blank document and starts to type a press note. Her fingers find a cadence. She writes while thinking of Shauna's texts, of engineers who had signed up to build a better way of caring for people, of a patient's mother who had sent a thank you letter that had nothing to do with profit, but everything to do with dignity. She writes not to punish but to preserve. She writes not to inflame, but to clarify. I have considered this offer. The draft begins. I am grateful for the interest and for the conversations that have taken place. But I will not sell the stewardship of neurospace in a way that undermines its mission or dilutes the voice of those who built it. Her sentences are short, surgical. She avoids invective. She avoids naming every slight. She explains the stakes on behalf of the people who cannot be in this room, but whose lives depend on the decisions made within it. A knock at the door. It is Clark, the family assistant, with tea and an attempt at casual concern that reads as a protocol. He is proficient at non-committal kindness. He asks if everything is all right. Danielle smiles and says simply, "Fine." She tells him she will be at dinner in 10 minutes. He nods and leaves. The door shuts on quiet. She saves the press draft, then rewrites it twice, removing anything that could be read as spite and keeping what must be said. The final sentence is a sentence she wants to be quoted. We will not trade the integrity of our mission for the sheen of someone else's brand. It is not particularly flashy. It is not a threat. It is a boundary. She calls Shauna. The CFO's voice is a low instrument of steadiness. If you walk away, we lose the check but keep the company, Shauna says. If you sign, you might keep a title and lose the team. That matters. Danielle thinks of the engineers who had trusted her with their careers. She thinks of interns who had told her, unprompted, that they believed in what neurospace could be. There is a practical calculus and an existential one. Who gets to tell the story of a company? Ownership is not just legal. It is narrative. It is who the public believes when the press asks whose name sits on the door. She texts a simple instruction to the PR contact she trusts in the city. Hold for my signal. She tells Shauna she will make an announcement, not in the drawing room, but in public. The decision feels less like provocation and more like refusal. When she returns to the table, the conversation has moved to the mechanics of continuity. Who will sit on committees? Who will handle the legacy foundation? Who will represent the vision at public events? They propose a governance structure that looks good on paper and softens into a plan that would hollow the company of its core. Victoria speaks about stewardship again, with a rehearsed gentleness. Charles crafts a sentence that is meant to sound magnanimous. We have so much to offer your mission. Danielle's fork rests. She listens to sentences sharpen into an argument about what is practical for the world as they imagine it, and she catalogs what will be lost. The founder's equity that ensured key team members could buy homes, the product roadmap that prioritized access over advertising, the small programs run from a rented meeting room that had helped rural clinics access diagnostics. She thinks of promises, made over ramen on late nights, that felt more sacred than any contract. The family passes the check across the table with the kind of casual generosity that is performative. Gregory makes a joke about temperament again, as if repetition could make scorch marks into laugh lines. This time the room quiets only when Danielle speaks. She says to Charles, quietly and in a voice that does not tremble, I'm not willing to sign terms that would transfer our control and keep only the appearances of leadership. She lets the words spread like a measured cloth. Some people at the table stiffen, others look away. She is calm, which makes her clarity sharp. Charles leans back. He is used to people resisting, but not to people who are resistant without spectacle. We thought there were ways to preserve your role, he says, as though their offers had been generosity rather than transactions. The sentence is a trade-off disguised as a gift. Danielle answers with a single question. Preserve what exactly? It lands like a scalpel. The question is clean, and it asks for specifics rather than rhetoric. There is a silence. The silverware's tinkle is suddenly louder. Victoria smiles in a way that suggests the conversation has moved into a new act of social theater. You can keep the title, she says, and we'll give you the resources to scale. Sometimes a leader chooses to step back from day to day and allow others to amplify their legacy. Amplify. A polite erasure. Danielle sees the phrase suspended in the air and reads the shape of the plan. They would keep the brand's face, while they would govern the mechanism. That is not stewardship. That is signage. She tells them what Shauna has said over the phone. Neurospace's people deserve clear leadership, not symbolic continuity. She speaks of the engineers, the clinicians who have built partnerships trusting a founder's commitment. Her words are neither theatrical nor small. They are the fulcrum of an argument she cannot surrender. Charles frowns, not because he is being cruel, but because his sense of social arithmetic is challenged. He is accustomed to deals where good manners smooth over the extractive logic. That evening, he offers two options: sign and keep a title, or accept a buyout that will raise the company's profile. He does not call it a buyout. He calls it strategic alignment. Danielle listens. She thinks about what the board will look like if she agrees to their structure, how many seats they will take, who will represent the new majority. She imagines decisions made without her. She pictures a platform reoriented by a boardroom that values the sheen of a partnership more than the people it serves. When she leaves the table for the last time that night, it is not an exit of melodrama. She thanks her hosts. She tells them she needs to sleep on it. They respond with the decorum of people who assume one more night buys consent. In the guest suite, she returns to the document she drafted. She edits it again, and then formats a one-paragraph statement for the press. It is precise and contains the bones of the message she wants to own publicly: gratitude, refusal, and a reasoned explanation anchored in mission. She saves the file. She sleeps on the decision, not for confusion, but to let her body weight carry the logic it has already decided. Morning is a bright incision across the lawn. The Bington's breakfasts are lit with practiced ease. People sip coffee like instruments. Danielle meets with Charles and Victoria one more time in a small salon where sunlight pools like an invitation. The family speaks about how a public announcement could rock markets and upset philanthropic calendars. Charles talks about responsible messaging. Victoria is concerned about optics. Gregory watches the exchange like a censor. Danielle tells them the truth. A public announcement will be necessary. She will not allow the narrative to be stitched together by others. I will make a statement in a neutral space, she says. It will be clear. It will be about our mission and our people. Her voice is firm. She is choosing the stage where the story will be told. They protest with the kind of objection that assumes logistics is persuasion. There are implications, Victoria says. We can help craft the language, be part of the message. No, Danielle says, and the word is not loud but absolute. If you would like to support Neurospace, do so in ways that respect our leadership and our people. I will not consent to a statement that softens the realities of what governance means. She closes her argument not with threat but with a set of conditions that make their offers less palatable. She is polite but irreducible. The salon falls into silence under the weight of old money thinking at the altar of new money problems. Errors of arithmetic have always been solvable with capital. Today the arithmetic is not simply dollars but dignity. Back in the suite, she schedules a press briefing in a community center in the city. A place with folding chairs and neutral banners. A space that refuses to be a prop of anyone's family portrait. She does this because she understands optics the way a sculptor understands negative space. Public ownership of narrative matters. The community center is accessible. It will be easy for reporters to reach, and it will place Neurospace's interests on an equal plane with the public it serves. She reaches for her phone. A glance at it shows a dozen unread messages, journalists sniffing for a quote, board members expecting a signature, and one text from her husband, flight delayed. I'll be there as soon as I can. A little emoji, an unshowy affirmation. She does not need him to make the choice. She does not need him to arrive for the decision to hold. But the message matters. It is a private echo that someone she loves understands the weight of the morning. There is a tenderness in the small note that steadies the room around her. She types back, "Don't rush. I've got this." Shauna is already coordinating with the PR firm. We'll book the community center, draft the release, and prepare a Q&A for issues they'll raise about governance and continuity, Shauna says. We'll keep it measured. You will speak. If you want, we can loop in trusted board allies to back the stance, but the message must come from you. Danielle imagines the press room, cameras in flats, microphones arrayed like curious insects, a podium where words can be measured into headlines. She imagines the spin cycle. The family will accuse her of being stubborn, someone will call her proud, an op-ed will suggest that she's missed a logical step. She thinks back to moments when narrative had been given to her by others, and remembers the aftermath of being spoken about instead of spoken for. In the quiet between coordination and execution, she walks to the window and looks at the place where the estate's hedgerow meets the sky. The sculpture of a woman, hand extended, seems half-finished. She thinks of legacy as an unfinished project. Someone else can finish a statue, they cannot finish a people's trust. When she calls Shauna to run through the language, she rehearses not for emotion, but for precision. We will say we decline to proceed under terms that would transfer control, she tells Shauna. We will say why, for whom, and what we plan next. No rhetoric. No name-calling. Simplicity will be our strength. Shauna agrees. Keep it short. Keep it principled. Let the words do the magnifying. They draft the opening line together. After careful consideration, we have decided not to accept the proposed terms. It is neither combative nor timid. It is declarative. Danielle saves the final draft and schedules a press notice to go live at noon after the briefing. She requests a list of reporters whom the firm trusts. She chooses neutral outlets, local and national. She asks for a human interest reporter who understands nonprofit mechanics and a business beat reporter who will translate governance into a public ledger. The plan begins to feel like a muscle memory she has built. She is moving through motion with the clarity of somebody who has rehearsed failure and victory in equal measure. The narrative is not about theatrical protest. It is about refusing to make a bargain that will rewrite what neurospace stands for. There is a knock on the door. It's Gregory, this time in a suit that announces command. He asks to speak privately. He wants to smooth things over. He offers an olive branch in the form of another clause, the family's way of claiming generosity after having proposed diminishment. He smiles, the smile of someone who gives quick grace and expects gratitude. Danielle hears him out. She replies that their structure will not protect the people who built neurospace, and that a brand without its builders is merely a display. Gregory's expression tightens in a way that would, in another time, be interpreted as surprise. He is not used to people who refuse with words instead of spectacle. You can be a public face, he says, soft now, as if generosity were being offered again in a smaller, prettier package. We can keep you. There's precedent for that. Danielle returns the smile that she has practiced the way a violinist practices a difficult passage. If you keep the face and choose the policy, then what remains of our mission could be performance, she says. That is not stewardship. There is an awkwardness then, a mismatch between their expectation of acquiescence and her refusal to perform it. Gregory tries one small barb. It just seems a risk to walk away from this table. The word table is meant to be a trap. It is the family's most cherished metaphor. Who sits at the table, who is allowed to carve. He frames the issue as an invitation she should be grateful for. Danielle's laugh is a short sound, not unkind. I built my own table, she says. The words are not a boast. They are the facts she will use to explain herself to the public. In the sentence is everything she has been stockpiling for nights of work and mornings of small victories. The statement reframes the image of a table from a static object of permission into a structure one can build and invite others to. The salon conversation diffuses into dinnertime choreography, and the family retires to plan their version of the message. Danielle returns to her suite, where she checks the press logistics one more time. The press office confirms a noon briefing at the community center, with live feeds and a roster of reporters. The PR firm has arranged a simple podium and a blue banner reading Neurospace. There will be chairs. There will be microphones. There will be questions. She prepares short, quotable lines, principles she wants echoed. Mission, stewardship, people first. Outside, the estate's routine rotates around its center of gravity, the Bington family's sense of self. Inside, Danielle is aligning hers to something older and truer, the people who believed when there was no headline to attend to them. She locks the suite door and looks at her reflection in the glass. Her posture does not betray fear. It betrays calculation, a readiness to clarify public truth. At 9:30, she sends the press advisory. The email goes forward with her name at the top. The words are unadorned. She hits send and feels the small release of someone who hands the story to the world because she refuses to let others hand it for her. She texts her husband, "I'm doing the noon briefing at the community center. No tricks." He responds quickly, "I'm rerouting. I'll be there." A short sentence and an emoji that says, "I'm coming," without dramatics. She does not need him. His message is not the force that makes her words true. It's a tether that reminds her she does not stand alone. It makes the world larger, and, for the moment, kinder. From the estate a car appears, polished, discreet, taking journalists home to their hotels. Across town, in a volunteer center where chairs fold and banners hang in neutral solidarity, the room is staged like a promise. A podium stands ready to be the instrument of her decision. Around 10, the first calls start to come in. Opinion pieces, reporters asking for clarity, a podcaster seeking a soundbite. The PR firm answers some. Shauna filters others. Danielle spends the morning refining the words she will say and the tone she will keep. She practices the exact phrasing to ensure no one else can recast her meaning. By 11, staff at Neurospace gather in a compact room lit by fluorescent honesty. Shauna speaks to them with the blunt tenderness of someone who has looked at spreadsheets and hearts at once. "Whatever happens today," she tells them, "we are not selling our integrity. We are choosing continuity with our mission." People nod, some with visible relief, some with a guarded hope that is not yet certainty, but is cleaner for being honest. Danielle stands in the back and hears the hum of the room. She notices a junior engineer, Aisha, who kept late to debug a tool on the last sprint. She notices a client liaison who has been quietly building relationships with clinics in towns where small hospitals felt ignored. She thinks of the work that will continue regardless of headlines. That is the gravity she carries to the podium. She steps into a car bound for the community center. The drive cuts through a city that feels indifferent to estates and their schedule. In the car, she folds the press note in half and puts it into her pocket like a talisman. The city slips by in unfamiliar vignettes. A bus with a handwritten poster for a community health drive. A storefront where a charity advertises free screenings. A coffee shop where students crowd a table with shared chargers. It is the public she wants to speak to. People for whom mission is not a word, but a life. The community center looks ordinary in a way that commands attention. It is not curated. Folding chairs are already set. A local cameraman mill about and stacks of press packets are arranged on a table. The podium is modest, next to a banner with Neurospace's logo that does not attempt to be anything but clear. Reporters adjust microphones, take notes, sip cheap coffee, and rehearse the angles. She steps toward the podium with the resoluteness of someone who has already decided. In the crowd, she senses ambition and curiosity. There are cameras, small, large, and a cluster of live TV vans whose satellite dishes tilt like searchlights. This is the theater of narrative, and she has chosen the stage. She breathes and thinks of the sentence she has chosen. "After careful consideration, we have decided not to accept the proposed terms. It is not performative. It is the threshold between two futures." She imagines the headlines. Some will applaud. Some will suggest imprudence. Others will try to turn the story into gossip about temperaments and table manners. She does not waste time predicting them. She is speaking for a future that will need both courage and clarity. The PR coordinator whispers that the press is ready. Her phone buzzes again. "Husband, delays lifted. I'm on the next flight. ETA. Noon 30. He will not be there when she begins." The message tightens the room. She had not invited his rescue, and he is not required for the authority she is about to claim. She types back, "See you there." She steps to the podium. Microphones bend forward like reeds. Reporters turn their attention. The world leans in. She looks at the faces and, for a half-breath, imagines the faces of the people she represents. Then she speaks, and her voice is clear, steady, unimpeachable in its logic. "Thank you," she begins. Neurospace was founded to bring accurate, accessible diagnostics to clinics and communities overlooked by mainstream solutions. Our work is the sum of many people's dedication. Today I must say firmly, after careful consideration, we will not proceed with the proposed terms. The terms would transfer control in ways that would undermine our mission and the people who created it. That is not a trade we will make. The room takes this in. Cameras click. A reporter asks a question about specifics. She answers with the precision of someone used to technical interrogation. The family's counsel will later claim the move was impetuous. She speaks instead to timelines and governance structures, to the transparency she owes the team she leads. She steps down from the specifics and toward the principle she wants the public to remember. We will continue to raise the capital we need, she says, but we will only do so on terms that ensure the people who built Neurospace keep a voice at the table that actually governs it. After she speaks, there is a pause that is not an absence but a recalibration. Microphones stay hot. The first wave of commentators begin to compose their angles. Someone asks if she fears the consequences. Financial, reputational. She smiles and answers with the measured truth she has rehearsed. I fear compromise more than consequence. My obligation is to the people whose care our platform enhances, and to the team that built it. A camera zooms in, hungry for the moment that can be compressed into a viral clip. Danielle's face is deliberate. There is no victory in it. There is stewardship. Her words are quotable. If you can't see the value in someone's presence at your table, you will feel the power of their absence. It is a line she had honed with Shauna, compact and not unarmed with hope. Questions cascade. Reporters press for reaction from the family. They look for quotes from Charles or Victoria, but find the line only of silence. The absence of their voice begins to shape the story in ways the family did not intend. The public track begins to fork. Some will celebrate a founder's refusal. Some will treat it as a stubborn misstep. She finishes the briefing by reiterating the purpose, mission, people, integrity, and thanks the reporters for their time. As the room buzzes into the immediate scramble of live feeds and initial takes, Danielle steps off the stage into the press tide. From the back of the crowd, a murmur swells like a second current. People glance toward the door where latecomers enter. There is the soft click of a suitcase rolling. She does not look up, because she does not need confirmation to hold her line. She has already made the choice. But the room's temperature shifts subtly, as if someone else's presence rearranges the air. The assistant whispers that a man is at the entrance asking to get through. She continues answering questions, calm and measured. The man walks toward the podium. He is not theatrical. He is simply present, the kind of presence that signals solidarity without spectacle. He places a hand on the back of a folding chair as he passes and does not try to claim the soundboard. A camera catches the movement. Reporters glance, then refocus. Danielle keeps the floor. She recognizes the man's profile across a flurry of faces. An unremarkable suit, a wedding band catching the light on his left hand, eyes that fold into the certainty of someone who has decided to be there. In that small recognition is the quiet of partnership. He does not take her mic. He does not speak for her. He stands in the room and becomes, in the simplest way, witness. For a beat that seems longer than it is, the room tastes a moment of recalibration. The incoming man does not eclipse her. He amplifies the truth she has spoken, that no one makes these decisions alone, but that the person who makes them is the one who must be heard. She continues to answer questions. The microphones still bend toward her words. A flash of understanding goes through the crowd. Someone important is beside her, not to rescue, but to underscore. The cameras do what cameras do. They capture and then magnify what the public will clip into headlines. The man's arrival becomes a line in the story, a validation, not an authoring. She finishes the last question, thanking the room. As she steps away, she feels the movement of the narrative shifting from private dinner room calculations to public verdict. Outside, a chorus of feeds begins to spread the news. She had declined the terms. The Bington family will have their own narrative to manage. The public will now have an image to interpret. She walks through the press pool with the measured composure of someone who has decided to carry the risk of clarity. Reporters call her name. Flashes punctuate the corridor to the exit. She keeps her head down, but her posture is not bowed. It is upright, like a column that supports rather than dominates. At the curb, a journalist runs up with a final question about whether she is sure this is the end or just the beginning. Danielle pauses and says plainly, "This is the beginning of us being accountable to the people we serve." The line is a small manifesto, not inflammatory, but irreversible. As she prepares to leave, the city around the community center hums with ordinary life. Traders on their way to lunch, a mother pushing a stroller, a bus driver marking time. The story she started is now in the public stream, and the ripple will determine investors' attention, the family's embarrassment, and the team's morale. She steps into the car and looks at the man who walked into the room a few minutes ago. He meets her eyes and gives a small, private smile. He does not speak. He does not need to. They both know that his arrival is not the reason the statement holds. His presence, visible now in photos, will simply be a human touchstone in a headline-hungry world. Danielle thinks of the pile of messages on her phone, the calls from investors, the offers that will likely now arrive, some aligned, some whose alignment will be dubious. She thinks of Shauna's calm confidence, of the interns who have stayed late to catch a release before a deadline, of the clinics that have decided to pilot Neurospace's technology. She carries all of that like a ledger. The car slides away from the community center and into the city. On the radio, a news anchor begins a segment that will stitch the day into a narrative frame. Heads of the press room will edit lines, choose angles, and some will attempt to recast her with the very vocabulary Gregory used at dinner. She places her hand over the folder in her lap and feels the crease of the paper beneath. There is the sense of a threshold crossed, the kind that does not guarantee victory or absolve risk. There will be fallout. There will be praise and criticism. There will be articles that miss her point and social feeds that spin splinters of her sentence into caricatures. But she knows with a practical finality that she walked into a room that wanted her to be decoration, and walked out insisting on being the craftsman of her company's future. That insistence is, imperfectly, the measure of the choice she has made. When they drop her back at Neurospace headquarters, the staff greets her with a hush that is part relief and part nerve. Shauna meets her with 2 coffees and a grin that reads like a shield. The team gathers around as updates ping in from reporters and investors. The energy in the room is a mixture of adrenaline and relief. People speak in hushed, excited fragments about offers and op-eds, and the small but vital reality that the company still belongs to those who built it. Danielle watches their faces and feels a softening she had not allowed herself to feel in weeks. The relief is practical, not theatrical, a slackening at the temples, the unclenching of hands that had been holding invisible ledgers. People drift toward her with small, earnest questions. They want to know what comes next, how their projects will proceed, whether their jobs will be tethered to a future they can trust. She answers in the plain language of plans, timelines, resource allocations, interim leadership, but she also gives them a sentence that is not a spreadsheet. We keep building. We keep being accountable to the people we serve. Shauna stands at the edge of the group like someone who has rehearsed for this exact moment of translation. She reads incoming emails on a tablet with the practiced efficiency of someone who can tell urgency from noise. Some calls are interested in partnership under clear governance, she says. Some are opportunistic. We'll triage. The room tightens around that word, triage, and everyone by habit understands it. The engineers nod. The liaison breathes a little easier. Outside, the first wave of coverage slams into the feeds. There is a tasteful business write-up, a sharp opinion piece, a glowing profile that frames the decision as dignified. Social feeds pull phrases apart into quotable moments. People clip the line about absence and presence. Influencers frame the story as a founder's stand. The Bington estate, predictably, releases a brief statement that reads like polished linen. Gratitude for conversations, continued interest in the company's welfare, regret that consensus was not achieved. The statement's language is flat and careful. It is a document designed to be read by accountants and social secretaries. It does not speak to the engineers who pushed a patch at midnight. An ugly substream appears, snipes about temperament and timing, anonymous pundits weaving the same old narrative. Danielle notices these with the clinical eye of someone who understands signal versus noise. Shauna and the PR team create a simple rubric. Respond only where there is factual necessity. Amplify messages that keep attention on mission. Decline the bait of personal invective. We don't react to trolling, Shauna says. We redouble on the people who matter. Investors call. Some are quick and transactional, their interest sharpened by a market move that prizes decisiveness more than nuance. Others, older and quieter, ask about governance structures and the team's long-term runway. A handful of smaller funds, ones that have built reputations on respecting founder-led missions, offer meetings on the condition that terms preserve board representation and mission covenants. Danielle listens. Her pen scratches not to sign but to record options. She is tired of promises that sound like paper wings. She is practiced now at turning them into achievable, enforceable clauses. A call comes from a community clinic director, someone whose name she had met only once at a conference, who thanks her in a voice that trembles with gratitude. "You kept us in the plan," the director says. "We were worried the platform would be repackaged into a product that wouldn't reach us." Danielle speaks to this caller as she would to a patient, directly, with the vocabulary of service rather than optics. She realizes the decision has already recalibrated what people expect of public leadership. That, more than the headlines, makes the day worth the risk. Meanwhile, the Bingtons move.